The name on the maintenance request form made Evelyn Hartwell stop mid-sentence. She had been talking to her assistant, something about rescheduling Thursday's budget review, and then she saw it, and the words just left her. She stood there in the glass-walled corridor of Hartwell & Associates' 14th floor, holding a manila folder she had picked up almost by accident from the HR intake desk. And she read the name again to make sure she hadn't imagined it. Thomas Bridewell. She hadn't heard that name in 19 years. The folder was thin, 2 pages. An application for a facilities maintenance position, the kind of role that involved replacing burnt-out ceiling bulbs and fixing the ventilation unit in the east stairwell that had been rattling since February. The HR coordinator, a careful young woman named Daphne, had flagged it with a yellow sticky note that said simply, "Overqualified." Confirm? Evelyn read the resume. A civil engineering degree from the University of Waterloo, a master's in structural systems from McGill, 7 years at a consultancy in Calgary whose name she recognized immediately. It was the kind of firm that got called in when bridges needed to be rebuilt. Then a gap, 4 years of nothing. And then this application typed neatly, asking to fix ventilation units and replace ceiling bulbs in a mid-sized architecture and development firm in downtown Ottawa. She closed the folder. She put it under her arm. She did not send it back to Daphne with a note. She did not forward it to the facilities manager, whose job it was to handle exactly this kind of thing. She went to her office, closed the door, and sat down at her desk, and looked out at the Rideau River for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and told Daphne to schedule Thomas Bridewell for an interview. He arrived at 8:15 on a Wednesday morning. Evelyn had made a point of being in the lobby, which was not something she did. She told herself she was early for another meeting. She was not. He came through the front doors in a gray canvas jacket, the kind worn until it fits like a second skin. He wore work boots that had been cleaned but not polished. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she had just forgotten. It had been 19 years, and when she'd last seen him they were 23, and people looked different at 23 than they do at 42. His hair had some gray in it now, at the temples, and there was a quietness around him that she didn't know how to describe except to say it was the kind of stillness that doesn't come from having nothing to think about. He gave his name at the front desk. He sat down in one of the lobby chairs and waited. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't fidget. He just waited, with his hands resting loosely in his lap, watching the atrium in the mild, unhurried way of a man who has learned that most waiting eventually ends. Evelyn watched him from across the lobby for 11 seconds. Then she walked over. He saw her when she was about 10 feet away, and something shifted in his face. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition arriving a little ahead of the moment he'd prepared for. He stood up. "Evelyn Hartwell," he said. "Thomas Bridewell," she said. They shook hands the way people do when they're trying to contain something larger than a handshake. She took him upstairs herself. She didn't explain why. He didn't ask. The interview room on the 8th floor had floor-to-sizzling windows and a long oak table that was slightly too formal for a maintenance position interview, and Evelyn was aware of that as she sat down across from him, but she had already committed to the room, and there was no graceful way out. She opened the folder. He watched her do it, hands flat on the table, the same stillness he'd had in the lobby. "The role is maintenance," she said. "Facilities. You'd report to Gordon, our facilities coordinator. Mostly reactive work. Things that break, things that need to be replaced. Some scheduled inspections." "I know what the role is," Thomas said. Not rudely, just accurately. "I know you know," she said. "I'm just telling you anyway." "A beat." "Daphne flagged your file," Evelyn said. "She thought I should know before it went further. That you might be." Her word was overqualified. "Daphne's right," Thomas said. "So why the application?" He looked at the table for a moment, then back at her. "I need steady work. I know buildings. The hours work for what I need them to work for. What do you need them to work for?" He was quiet for 2 seconds. "I have a daughter. She's 9. I drop her off at school at 8 and I pick her up at 3:30. I need a job that fits around that and doesn't ask me to explain why." Evelyn wrote nothing. She was watching him. "Where's her mother?" she asked, and then immediately said, "Sorry, that's not a relevant question." "It's fine," Thomas said. "She passed away 3 years ago, ovarian cancer." The room was very still. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, and she meant it the way you mean things when the inadequacy of the words is obvious to everyone in the room. "Thank you," Thomas said. He didn't look for more from her on the subject. He seemed to have calibrated exactly how much space he could allow that particular topic in any given conversation before it took more than he had available to give. "The role is yours if you want it," Evelyn said. "I'm not going to interview you the rest of the way." He looked at her steadily. "You didn't interview me at all." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." He started on a Monday. He came in at 7:45, which was 45 minutes before the building was properly operational, because he'd asked Gordon for the walkthrough tour the week before and had identified 17 maintenance items that hadn't made it onto the existing list. Gordon, who was a practical man and not easily impressed, had spent most of that walkthrough in a state of mild bewilderment, because Thomas asked questions that were not maintenance questions. They were structural questions, load-bearing questions, the kind of questions about airflow and drainage gradients that Gordon had never thought to ask and hadn't realized were related to why the east stairwell smelled faintly of mildew every spring. "You've got water infiltration in the northeast corner of the building," Thomas had said, crouching near a baseboard in the third-floor corridor. "Probably been going in under the flashing for 2 or 3 years. You'd want to look at the membrane on the roof above this section before the fall rain starts." Gordon had looked at the baseboard. He'd looked at Thomas. "How do you know that?" "The paint," Thomas said, "and the angle of the damage. It's not coming up from the floor, it's tracking down the wall. The source is above." Gordon had written it down. Later, when he mentioned it to one of the junior project managers, a young man named Eric, who had been with the company for 14 months and still had the professional habit of pretending he understood everything the first time, Eric had looked at the maintenance work order and said, "Why is the facilities guy talking about membrane integrity on the northeast facade?" Gordon had shrugged. "He seems to know what he's talking about." "He's a maintenance guy," Eric said. "He's a maintenance guy who knows more about this building than we do," Gordon said. Thomas worked quietly. He ate lunch alone in the break room on the 7th floor. A sandwich, usually, in a container that looked like it had been packed with some care. He didn't talk much, but he wasn't unfriendly. He had the manner of someone who had learned to exist lightly in shared spaces, to take up only the room he needed. People said good morning and he said good morning back. People left him alone and he left them alone. He was good at his job in a way that was hard to articulate but easy to notice. Things got fixed faster than they had before. Problems got identified before they became problems. The building, which was old enough to have its own set of accumulated grievances, seemed to settle slightly under his attention. The way an old house will sometimes settle when someone is finally paying proper attention to it. The woman from accounting, whose name was Beth, told him one morning that the radiator in the 3rd floor for conference room had been making noise for 2 years, and 3 previous contractors had not been able to fix it. He went and looked at it on his lunch break. He had it sorted by 2 in the afternoon. Beth told him he was a miracle worker. He said it was just a valve. But the moment that changed things, the moment after which nothing in the building was quite the same, happened on a Tuesday in October, when the firm's senior structural consultant was out sick and a project review meeting was already in progress, and the numbers on the load distribution model were wrong in a way that nobody in the room could identify. Evelyn had called the meeting herself. It was for the Gatineau Bridge Approach project, a municipal contract worth $11 million. And the kind of project where being wrong was not an option. The consultant who was sick, a man named Bertrand who had 30 years of experience and a very particular way of refusing to explain his methodology to people he considered his professional inferiors, had left behind a model that contained an error in the lateral force assumptions. Nobody in the room could see where it was. Thomas was in the room because the HVAC unit above the boardroom had been making a sound for 3 days that suggested it was about to fail spectacularly, and he had been called in to check the access panel in the ceiling. He had climbed the ladder, checked the panel, identified the issue, and was preparing to come back down when the argument below him reached a pitch that made him pause. "It's the tributary area," a project engineer named Hannah said, looking at the screen. "Something's off in how he's accounting for the tributary area on the central piers. That can't be it," Eric said. "Bertrand doesn't make that kind of mistake. Someone made that kind of mistake," Hannah said. "Can we get him on the phone? He's in the hospital. Can we get someone else on the phone?" It's a proprietary model. We need his specific. Thomas came down the ladder. He picked up his tools. He was heading for the door when he stopped, looked at the screen, and said, without preamble, "The error is in the eccentricity calculation. He's using the wrong moment arm on the second pier from the north. If you adjust the reference point to the shear center instead of the centroid, it should resolve." The room went quiet. He hadn't said it loudly. He'd said it the way you mentioned something you noticed in passing, the way you might say the back tire looks a little low. Hannah was the one who spoke first. She was looking at him with an expression that had moved past surprise and into something more careful. "Where did you get that?" Thomas glanced at the screen. The numbers on the third column. The resultant vector doesn't reconcile with the pier spacing. The only way it works is if the moment arm is measured from the wrong reference point, Eric said, loudly and before he could stop himself. "Who is this?" Nobody answered him immediately. Hannah pulled up the calculation. Her fingers moved quickly. She found the reference point. She changed it. She ran the numbers. The model resolved. She sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked at Thomas, who was standing near the door with his toolbox in his hand, and she said, "What's your name?" "Thomas," he said. "Thomas what?" "Bridewell." Hannah's expression shifted again. She turned to look at Evelyn, who was sitting at the head of the table and had not moved during any of this. "Do you know this person?" "Yes," Evelyn said. After that, the building knew him differently. It wasn't that people treated him differently right away. Humans are slower than that, and most of them had already categorized him in a way that required some effort to revise. But the story moved, the way stories do in buildings where people share kitchenettes, and by Wednesday afternoon, most of the firm had heard a version of it. By Thursday morning, the versions had multiplied and grown, the way stories always do when people are trying to explain something that doesn't fit the category they assigned it to. Eric, to his credit, found Thomas on Thursday morning in the second-floor corridor and said, "I was rude to you in that meeting." "I didn't know." "You weren't rude," Thomas said. "You asked a reasonable question. I meant it dismissively." "I know," Thomas said. "It's fine." Eric opened his mouth, then closed it. He had been preparing a more thorough apology, something with more explanation in it, and Thomas had removed the need for it in a way that felt generous without being gracious about it. Eric wasn't sure what to do with that. He nodded and went back to his office and thought about it for most of the morning. Hannah came to find him on Friday. She brought coffee, 2 cups, 1 black, which she had guessed correctly, and she sat down across from him in the break room and put 1 cup in front of him. "I looked you up," she said. "I figured someone would," Thomas said. "The Portage River analysis," she said. "The 2017 review. That was you, part of me. The methodology is still being used. There's a paper that cites it 3 times. She paused. "What happened?" He looked at his coffee. Outside the window, the Ottawa River was doing what it did in October, which was turn a deep, serious gray that made the city look like it was being taken back by something older than the city. "My wife got sick," Thomas said. "She needed a lot of care toward the end. The consultancy needed someone who could travel. Those 2 things didn't fit together. You left the industry," Hannah said. "I stepped back, and then it's been 3 years of just making sure Chloe is okay, making sure we're okay." He was quiet for a moment. "It's not a tragedy. I want to be clear about that. It's just how things went." Hannah looked at him with the steady attention of someone who was recalibrating something she'd already made up her mind about. "Chloe is your daughter?" "She's 9, Thomas said. "She likes horses. She's been asking to take riding lessons since she was 6, and I keep telling her we'll get there." Hannah smiled. "Has she inherited your whatever that was in the boardroom?" Thomas considered. "She's very good at figuring out when something is structurally unsound," he said. "She told me last spring that our front porch railing would fail if anyone leaned on it from the right angle." She was correct. Evelyn asked to see him on a Thursday afternoon in November. The leaves were gone from the trees along the canal, and the city had the stripped, honest look it gets in the weeks before the first snow covers everything again. She had spent most of October and November thinking about what to do about Thomas Bridewell, and she had arrived at a decision that she knew was either very right or potentially awkward, and she had gone back and forth enough times that she had decided to stop going back and forth and just say the thing. He came to her office and sat down and waited. "I want to talk to you about a role," she said. A different role, he said. A different role, she agreed. We have a structural review position that's been effectively empty since Bertrand's retirement. He was meant to do the handover to someone junior, but that fell apart for reasons I won't bore you with. The Gatineau project is the most visible, but there are 4 others at various stages that need proper structural oversight. It's not a senior partner role. I want to be honest about what it is, but it's full-time, it's salaried, and the hours have some flexibility built in. Thomas was quiet. You can think about it, Evelyn said. I'm thinking about it now, Thomas said. She waited. I'd need to see the files, he said. The 4 projects. Before I could say yes in good conscience, I'd need to see where they are. That's reasonable. And I'd need the hours to be real flexibility, not the kind of flexibility that means yes in theory and no in practice when a deadline comes. Understood. I'm not interested in recovering a career, Thomas said. He said it simply without bitterness or emphasis. I had a career. I had other things happen. What I'm interested in is doing work that's worth doing, for hours that let me be home when Chloe needs me home. That's the whole list. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. That's a reasonable list, she said. I know it is, he said. He took the role. The transition was not dramatic. He continued working the maintenance schedule until Gordon had time to hire a proper replacement. 4 weeks, as it turned out. During those 4 weeks, he did both jobs. Nobody asked him to. He simply didn't leave a gap in the maintenance work until the gap could be filled without consequence. Gordon mentioned this to Evelyn in passing, and she said nothing, but she wrote it down somewhere internal, the way you write down things that confirm something you already knew. On the Monday of his first official week in the structural review role, he came in at 7:45, same as always, and he went to his new office, a proper office on the 6th floor, with a window that looked west over the river, and he put his jacket on the back of the chair, and he sat down and opened the first of the 4 project files. Hannah knocked on the open door at 8:15. She had 2 coffees. She put one on his desk and said, "The Gatineau presentation is on the 14th. Bertrand left notes, but most of them are in his own shorthand. I've been trying to decode them for 3 weeks. Put them on my desk," Thomas said. She put them on his desk. She looked around the office, which was sparse. No photos yet, no personal objects except a small, battered notebook sitting beside the keyboard. She looked at the notebook for a moment. "What is that?" she asked. He glanced at it. "I've been keeping a site diary since 2004, every project. Things I noticed, adjustments, what worked. That's 20 years of notes." 22, he said. "I started before I graduated." Hannah picked it up. He didn't stop her, and opened it somewhere in the middle. The pages were dense with a handwriting that was small and precise and occasionally supplemented with quick diagrams, the kind made with 3 or 4 lines that somehow communicated exactly what they needed to. "This is remarkable," she said. "It's just a notebook," he said. She put it back on the desk. She looked at him with the expression she'd had in the boardroom in October, the one that meant she was thinking about something in a different way than she had been before. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm glad you're here." "I know," Thomas said. "Thank you." She left. He opened Bertrand's notes. He put his reading glasses on. He'd started needing them this year, a fact he'd been slow to make peace with, and he bent over the pages, and he began to work. The Gatineau presentation went well. It went well in the particular way that technical presentations sometimes go, when the person delivering them has such an undramatic command of the material that the audience finds itself relaxing without knowing why. Thomas did not perform certainty. He simply had it, in the straightforward way of someone who has thought about a problem long enough that the thinking has become part of how he sees. There was a moment, partway through, when a city engineer in the back row asked a question about the lateral bracing assumptions. A pointed question, the kind designed to check whether the presenter actually understands what they've put on the slides, or whether someone else prepared it for them. Thomas paused the slide, turned to the whiteboard behind him, and drew 3 lines in a vector diagram. He answered the question in 40 seconds. The city engineer wrote something down and did not ask another pointed question. Evelyn was in the room. She did not say anything during the presentation, but afterward in the corridor, when the city engineers had moved on to talk to the project manager about scheduling, she fell into step beside Thomas and said, quietly, "Good work in there." "It's a good project," Thomas said. "The city has been patient about the timeline. They deserve a clear answer. They got one, Evelyn said. They walked together toward the elevators. Outside it was sleeting, the gray, purposeful Ottawa sleet of late November that means winter has made up its mind. "How is Chloe liking the new schedule?" Evelyn asked. Thomas almost smiled. "Not quite, but close. She says I seem less tired. Are you?" Hegan said yes, he said. "Some." The elevator arrived. They both got in. There was a comfortable silence of the kind that exists between people who knew each other a long time ago and have found, with some surprise, that there is still something there. Not what it was, because what it was a long time ago, but something else, something quieter and less defined, and possibly more durable. "She's been asking about the writing lessons again," Thomas said. "And I told her we'd get there," he said. "And I think this time I meant it." Chloe's bedroom had a window that looked out over the backyard and, beyond the backyard, the back of a neighbor's garage with a rusted weathervane that had been pointing the wrong direction for as long as she could remember. She had been asking about that weathervane for 2 years. Her father had explained the first time she asked that the pivot must have seized, that it was stuck. She had asked if they could fix it. He had said it wasn't their weathervane to fix. She had accepted this, with the logical thoroughness of a 9-year-old who had been raised by someone who explained things properly. But on a Sunday in December, Thomas came home from the hardware store with a small bag and went next door and knocked and talked to the neighbor, an older man named Douglas who had lived there for 30 years and who had, it turned out, been meaning to fix the weathervane for some time but had never gotten around to it. And the two of them spent 40 minutes in the cold doing something with a ladder and a small amount of grease. That evening, Chloe came to find Thomas in the kitchen. "It's pointing north," she said. "It is," he said. She thought about this. "You fixed it." "Douglas and I fixed it," he said. She went back to her window. She stood there for a while, looking at the weathervane turning freely in the December wind, pointing reliably north, doing the thing it was made to do after years of pointing nowhere in particular. She didn't say anything else about it that night, but the next morning she put a drawing on the kitchen table before she went to school. A house, a weathervane, a figure on a ladder. At the bottom in her careful, blocky printing, the dad fixed it. Thomas picked it up. He looked at it for a long time. He folded it carefully twice and put it in the breast pocket of his jacket, which was the gray canvas one. The one he'd worn to his first interview at Hartwell & Associates on a Wednesday morning when the lobby was still quiet and a name on a maintenance form had stopped someone cold. He wore that jacket to work. He always did.